guest lectures. Our chairpersons for this session are Dr. P.S. Reddy Garu, Dr. Shyam Kumar Babji Garu, and Dr. Kodandagiri Garu. And the speakers are, first speaker is Dr. T.V.R.K. Murthy Garu. I request the chairpersons to take over the session. Dr. P.S. Reddy Garu, sir.
Sir, this is Babji Shyam Kumar, sir.
Sir.
Sir, for this guest lectures, now I invite Dr. T.V.R.K. Murthy Garu on microvascular decompression for trigeminal neurology. Hello.
Yeah.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Yes, sir, Babji, audible and seen. Sir, Murthy, sir, good afternoon. Welcome, sir. Welcome. Please.
Good afternoon to all of you. Can you hear me? Can you see my slides?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right, sir.
Right. Thank you very much, respected chairpersons. And first of all, I would like to congratulate the organizing committee of the AP Neurocon, who are doing an excellent job, and also thank them for inviting me for this guest lecture. So today I'll be talking about microvascular decompression for trigeminal neuralgia, mainly concentrating on our experience, and I'll be projecting some videos. So there have been, trigeminal neuralgia is a disease which has been known for many years now, many centuries, and there have been multiple names which have been given for that. And one very interesting name is what we call as suicide disease. It seems many people have committed suicide because they could not bear the disease, bear the pain of trigeminal neuralgia. Other synonyms are tic douloureux, prosopalgia, Fothergill's disease, etc. It is actually one of the most painful conditions which is known to mankind, and the incidence of this is about 1 in 15,000. And a figure that is 1 in 15,000, actually the real figure might be higher because of frequent misdiagnosis. For example, this is one of my patients who is, you can see, is an elderly lady. She is around 65 to 70 years old, and you can see that she has been operated. And this is her front view of the face. And you can see that actually she has gone to a dental surgeon because of the pain in the maxillary and mandibular divisions of the nerve. And then the dental surgeon has thought that it might be pain which is originating from the teeth. And then they have pulled out all the teeth in the upper jaw and the lower jaw behind the right incisors. So most of these patients actually, before coming to a neurosurgeon, they either go to a oral facial-maxillary surgeon or they go to a dental surgeon. And that is where most of the misdiagnosis occurs. Pathophysiology, as in any condition in medicine, when we are not very sure of the pathophysiology, there have been multiple hypotheses which have been given. Similar is the case with trigeminal neuralgia also. Some say it is because of the demyelination of the trigeminal nerve causing ectopic impulses and then ephaptic conduction, vascular compression of the nerve root by aberrant or tortuous vessels, and secondary trigeminal neuralgia is maybe because of multiple sclerosis, compression by a tumor, amyloid, AV malformations, infarcts in the pons, and sometimes it can be because of some bony compression. The European Association of Neurologists and the American Association of Neurological Surgeons together have given some criteria in 2009. They have divided it into two types, but will not go into the details because again, European Association of Neurologists has given guidelines in 2019, which I think we should be following. So they have basically divided trigeminal neuralgia into a primary type and a secondary type. Primary type is again divided into idiopathic and classic. Idiopathic, there are again subdivisions where there is no neurovascular conflict and neurovascular conflict without morphological changes in the fifth nerve. Whereas classic always has some amount of morphological changes in fifth nerve. The classification only goes to say that trigeminal, when a patient has trigeminal neuralgia, microvascular decompression will help the most in a patient who has got idiopathic in this category, that is neurovascular conflict without morphological changes or with morphological changes in the fifth nerve. And also there is a phenotypic classification which they have given where they say trigeminal neuralgia is because of purely paroxysmal trigeminal neuralgia, or it can be trigeminal neuralgia with continuous pain. There has been a lot of studies on the role of trigeminal reflexes and evoked potentials, but this has been primarily before the advent of MRI. After the advent of MRI, it has taken over, and MRI is almost sort of a compulsory investigation before we manage trigeminal neuralgia. And the role of trigeminal reflexes as of today is restricted to a patient who is contraindicated for MRI. So the only thing which we have to know here is that if a patient has intact trigeminal reflexes, it is more likely to be trigeminal neuralgia. And if the patient has some impairment of the trigeminal reflexes, it can be mostly a secondary trigeminal neuralgia, and we have to look for other causes other than idiopathy. So when we make the diagnosis, as I have already mentioned, trigeminal neuralgia is mostly a clinical diagnosis. There are some red flags which we have to always keep in mind. Any abnormal neuroexamination, like in the previous slide, I had mentioned about the trigeminal reflexes. And if the trigeminal reflexes, there is any aberrance in the trigeminal reflexes, it should raise a red flag. Probably we are dealing with a secondary trigeminal neuralgia and not a primary one. Any abnormal oral, dental, or ear examination. If the age is less than 40 years, immediately it should raise a red flag, because trigeminal neuralgia is a disease which is uncommon below 40 years of age. Bilateral symptoms, dizziness or vertigo, any of these things are there, immediately we should consider secondary trigeminal neuralgia and not a primary one. Any hearing loss, if there is a numbness in the distribution of the trigeminal nerve, pain which is lasting for more than 2 minutes, or pain which is outside of the trigeminal distribution, and any visual changes. So any of these things immediately should alert us to the fact that we might be dealing with a secondary type of trigeminal neuralgia and not a primary one. What is the choice of investigation of MRI which we should prefer in these cases? MRI, depending upon the company, it has been differently labeled as Fiesta technique, CIS technique, Drive technique. Philips company gives it as a CIS technique. So this is actually a heavily T2 weighted image where we can clearly identify the nerve. This is the trigeminal nerve here, and this is the trigeminal nerve on the right side, where you can see that there is a blood vessel which is crossing the trigeminal nerve. And the other sequences which have been recommended are 3D T2 weighted images, the same as the CIS sequence which I mentioned earlier. 3D TOF MRA, you can see in this image, you can see that this is the blood vessel, this is the offending blood vessel, and this is the nerve below that. So TOF MRA gives an idea about the offending blood vessel. And 3D T1 gadolinium enhanced MRA gives us if there are any morphological changes in the trigeminal nerve which are present. Now, suppose a patient comes with trigeminal neuralgia to our clinic. What are the options which we should advise to the patient? The first is obviously the medical treatment, and carbamazepine and oxcarbazepine is the drug of choice. But if the pain is not controlled because of that, then probably microvascular decompression should be the first choice in most of the patients. Reasons being that in patients who underwent a subsequent microvascular decompression, that is the first time they underwent some other procedure, and then the second time because they did not have relief, they went for a microvascular decompression. They found that there is a lower rate of pain relief was documented compared with patients who underwent a straightaway MVD for drug-resistant trigeminal neuralgia. And also patients who underwent MVD as their first surgical intervention experienced lower rates of facial numbness in the preoperative and postoperative period. These are probably the two reasons why we should advise microvascular decompression straight away for a patient who is having a drug-resistant trigeminal neuralgia. Now, there is one study in 2017 in Journal of Neurosurgery where they found that there are 4 factors which predict a higher recurrence of pain in these patients. Female sex, a preoperative symptoms of more than 8 years duration, venous compression, and lack of immediate postoperative relief should immediately alert us to the sense that the possibility of their having a long-term relief of the pain is little less likely compared to other patients. Now, what exactly is the microvascular decompression? This is basically for the residents. What we normally do is we separate the nerve and vessel with a small piece of Teflon, gel foam, or muzzle. Any of these things can be used. Coming to our experience, we had the occasion to operate on 126 patients in the past 10 years, and out of which 66 males and 60 females with a male-female ratio of 1.1:1. right side 72 and left side 54. The involvement of the ophthalmic division was seen in 28 patients. And as you can see, the bulk of the almost 98 patients out of our series are either pure maxillary, pure mandibular, or a combination of maxillary and mandibular nerve involvement. Now, I would actually like to address some of the points which we should, especially the residents and the junior consultants and the people who have come into neurosurgery of late should know. One is which approach should be preferred, whether it is endoscopic versus microscopic. This I have included just for completion's sake. My experience with the endoscopic microvascular decompression is very limited. So probably whatever I'm going to talk in the next 2 or 3 slides is what I have taken from the literature. The advantages of microscopy is we are all used to it. It is a familiar tool. I mean, we have entered the neurosurgery with a microscope in our hands. So we are very, very familiar with a microscope, and also it gives us a 3D imaging, whereas an endoscopy gives only a 2D image. But the advantages of endoscopy are that it will be a smaller incision. We get a 360-degree panoramic view. We have a better visualization around corners, and the incidence of facial paresis and numbness is lesser compared to microscopic MVD. And this is a paper which has come in Journal of Neurosurgery, November 2019, where they say that the endoscopic has a lot more approaches to a lot more advantages compared to a microscopic MVD. And probably, I think, especially the junior people and the junior consultants and the residents should have more exposure towards endoscopic microvascular decompression compared to microscopic. Always, I think probably my feeling is that we should have a combined approach, and especially in cases where we are not able to visualize the offending vessel, I think we should always try to put in an endoscope, which we normally do, and see if there are any vessels or anything which we are missing. Now, the second most important thing which I would like to stress upon is, and this is actually a very important thing, what should be done with the petrosal vein or the Dandy's vein? So actually, when we go into the anatomy of the superior petrosal vein complex, it is actually a complex. It is a very complex type of structure. And sometimes a major part of the cerebellum can actually drain through the superior petrosal sinus into the lesser superior petrosal sinus. Sorry, superior petrosal vein can drain into the superior petrosal sinus. So what to do in a case where the superior petrosal vein is exactly in the way when we are trying to operate on a trigeminal neuralgia? For example, this is a small video. You can see here it is a complex. There is one vein here, there is one vein here, and there is one vein here, which are all part of the superior petrosal vein complex. It is always better that we operate around the veins, above and below the veins, rather than sacrifice the veins. And there have been multiple studies, which I'll quote in the next slide. So it is better that we try to pull the vein a little and then try to operate around the vein rather than coagulate and cut off the vein. Usually normally what we do is, if there is a layer of arachnoid over the vein, we try to actually cut the arachnoid a little away from the vein so that the arachnoid goes and wraps against the vein, giving it some strength. Or sometimes we put a small piece of Surgicel over the vein so that it immediately clings to the nerve and gives some strength to the vein, so that even a little manipulation by the dissectors and all that is tolerated by the vein. So there have been different studies which have quoted different results, with some studies showing negligible complications on division of superior petrosal vein, and some studies showing a complication rate almost to the tune of 30%. But overall, it is better to preserve the vein to optimize patient outcome. And this has been discussed in Neurosurgical Focus, volume 45, by Vinayak Narayan et al. But we have actually heard two lectures from the masters saying that we can safely coagulate the superior petrosal vein in CP angle tumors and all that, where the vein comes in the way. So probably there is a slight difference in a tumor and microvascular decompression. The fact is that in a microvascular decompression, we are dealing with an absolutely normal anatomy, whereas in a tumor, it is a slow progression of compression over the cerebellum and the venous system. So already there will be some amount of tributaries which have been formed for the superior petrosal vein as the tumor increases in size. And probably in tumors, it might be little safer compared to in a microvascular decompression. But overall, in any case, I think the safety of the veins should be utmost priority for the surgeon. Sometimes the superior petrosal vein is the offending vessel. Then what to do? As far as possible, it is better to do a microvascular decompression for the superior petrosal vein rather than trying to coagulate and take it out. But in exceptional cases, if we are not able to do that, then probably we are left with no other option but to coagulate and section the vein. Now, this is a small video of a microvascular decompression. You can see that there is a huge blood vessel. We are trying to push the blood vessel to a side, and that is the nerve you can see. This is a blood vessel which is lateral to the nerve. This is a very simple, straightforward surgery. And probably once you open the dura and focus the microscope on the nerve within 15 to 20 minutes, your surgery is done. And probably you can go to hemostasis stage. So that is all the surgery. Within 10 to 15 minutes, we can do off the surgery of microvascular decompression. But all days are not ours, and we are not lucky on all days. And so there have been some, yeah. See, this is again a small video where you can see that this is the trigeminal nerve. I'm sorry about the poor quality of the video. This is the trigeminal nerve, and this is the blood vessel. This blood vessel is actually on the inferior aspect of the nerve, and you can see how much of distortion the trigeminal nerve is undergoing because of the blood vessel. So in these cases, it is a little difficult compared to the previous one where we see that the vessel is purely lateral. So here we have to separate the vessel, and already the nerve is under a lot of traction. We have to pull the level to pull the vessel downwards, and then try to insert a Teflon piece there. So here I are trying to put the Teflon piece there to separate the vessel and nerve. But again, if the vessel is inferior, it is a little better. Inferior or lateral vessel is a little better rather than if the vessel is medial. Here, what happens is, see, in this case, you can see that this is the trigeminal nerve. We're not able to see the vessel because the vessel is on the medial aspect of the nerve. So these are a little difficult cases where you have to significantly, say here, you have to significantly retract the nerve to identify the offending vessel. So the vessel is here. This is the vessel. That is the vessel. You can see it is coming into the view. So it is actually a little difficult in these cases for us to put in a Teflon piece there. This is another case of where you can see that you can see the amount of distortion which the trigeminal nerve is undergoing because the vessel is pushing from the medial aspect. You are not able to see the vessel directly. One very important thing in any trigeminal neuralgia surgery is that we have to do a very good arachnoid dissection to mobilize the vessel. So here actually it is a little blind procedure where you are trying to push, because the vessel is purely medial to the nerve, you are trying to push the Teflon piece there. And insert it between the vessel and nerve there. Sometimes what happens is there is a dual compression by an artery and vein. It is very essential for us to relieve both the compressions, whether it is the venous compression or the arterial compression. Both need to be relieved for us to get a good result. So here you can see the vein which is present on the lateral aspect of the nerve. This vein is going above the nerve like that, and the artery is on the medial aspect. So artery should always be pushed by a piece of Teflon, whereas vein, probably if we are not having enough space between the vein and the nerve, probably a small piece of Surgicel or something, or some amount of muzzle probably can be used to separate the vein. Another condition, which is a little risky proposition, is basilar ectasia. where you can see that here in this axial view, you can see that the basilar artery is here, and it is very, very close to the trigeminal nerve, pressing on the nerve. And these patients usually have extremely severe pain. And this is the video. Here you can see that this is the trigeminal nerve, and this is the basilar artery. This whitish structure is the atherosclerotic basilar artery, which is pressing on the trigeminal nerve here. So here actually you have to literally push the basilar artery away from the nerve and then try to insert a small piece of Teflon between the nerve and the vessel. What we have found in 2 of our cases is that both the videos I'll show you. This video is not very clear, but I think the next one is better. Here you can see that actually the nerve is divided into 2. Let me just, so this is the nerve going, and the vessel is actually splitting the nerve into 2 parts. Some of the nerve is on the medial side, probably the motor part of the fifth nerve is on the medial side, and probably the sensory part is on the lateral side. It is very, very difficult for us really to do a microvascular decompression here, because it is very difficult to push in a piece of Teflon there. So in both the cases which we have come across, what we have done is we have actually taken muzzle from the suboccipital muscles, and then with an angle dissector, we have tried to push the muzzle in between the vessel and the nerve. But obviously, I'm sure we'll not be able to do a very good microvascular decompression here. Luckily for us, both of the patients had a very good relief of pain after the procedure. So as I said, it is very, very essential for us to do a good arachnoid dissection. And here you can see that we are trying to push the muzzle there. And obviously, I don't think we'll be able to do a very good job of doing a microvascular decompression there. Now, sometimes what happens is that we'll not be able to see any offending vessel. Then it is always, so we have to go back to the MRI. In this MRI, you can see that the offending vessel is exactly at the root entry zone. And it is actually probably way back when we're going from the CP angle region, then it is actually way back and very, very close to the brainstem. So this is the video of that MRI, where you can see that this is the trigeminal nerve. The entire length of the cisternal segment of the trigeminal nerve is exposed. And this is the offending vessel, which is very, very close to the brainstem. See that. So always when we are not able to see any vessel here, and you can see that we have put some Surgicel over the superior petrosal vein so that it gives some strength to the vein. Whenever we are retracting with the suction, it should not tear off. And that is the offending vessel. We are trying to pick it up. So there is, in our series, there has been one patient who had both glossopharyngeal and trigeminal neuralgia. He was complaining of severe mandibular division pain, along with pain in the throat also. And MRI was showing a vessel which was close to the glossopharyngeal and the lower cranial nerves. And you can see that that is the vessel there. So that is the vessel over the lower cranial nerves. And as I was mentioning earlier, an arachnoid dissection is most crucial in doing a microvascular decompression. It is very, very essential. And the same patient, when we go to the cranial end, here actually I was already trying to push in a piece of Teflon, but probably I did not do the arachnoid. See, still some amount of arachnoid you can see there. So that is why we could not push it. And I had to take it out and again then dissect the arachnoid properly and then again put the vessel, put the Teflon piece there. So that is the offending vessel. Presently, so you can now you can appreciate the offending vessel. That is the vessel. So do a good dissection. Pull all the rootlets of the trigeminal nerve to one side, push the nerve away, and then try to put the Teflon piece in between them. So unless we do an adequate arachnoid dissection, it will be very difficult for us to really do a good job with the microvascular decompression. Now it is going quite smoothly, and you can see that the vessel and nerve are separated now. Now, the next question to be answered is, suppose there is no demonstrable vascular loop on MRI and the patient has a severe pain, then what are the options which we have? There have been different propositions as to what we can do. Some people say that you just do a good arachnoid dissection. Some people say that you just rub your dissector against on the trigeminal nerve. Some people advocate a trigeminal rhizotomy. But probably, I mean, according to the literature, if we do not find a good demonstrable vascular loop on MRI, it is always better to go for other procedures of the trigeminal nerve other than microvascular decompression, like glycerol injection into the glycerol or alcohol injection into the trigeminal ganglion and other procedures. Some special considerations before I close down. This is a article which is very recent in August 2020, where they say that the only one predictor of a long-term pain relief after surgery following a microvascular decompression was a severe neurovascular conflict. Patients with significant neurovascular conflict had a significantly better relief of pain than those who did not. So perioperatively and on MRI, if we see that there is a significant pressure on the trigeminal nerve, usually these patients do well. Second question is what to do in elderly patients who come to us with severe MVD, severe trigeminal neuralgia, whether we go for MVD or SRS. And this is again another article in October 2020 in Neurosurgical Focus, where they say that studies have revealed that longer pain freedom is achieved with microvascular decompression than SRS in elderly patients. So if a patient is otherwise fit for surgery, if an elderly patient is otherwise fit for surgery, MVD should be the preferred treatment than SRS. So the imaging characteristics which determine outcome. So if there is an atrophy of the nerve which is proximal to area of compression, it indicates a good outcome, whereas atrophy distal to nerve, distal to the offending vessel gives a bad outcome. So this is a picture. This is actually taken from the journal, where they say, for example, this is the offending vessel, is cut through here, that is proximal to the offending vessel. If there is an atrophy, the outcome is usually good. But if the like a cut here, if that is distal to the compression, if there is atrophy here, then the outcomes are usually not very good. So what are the post-operative complications which we came across in our series of 126 patients was, luckily for us, God's grace, the mortality was 0. CSF leak from wound we had in 4 patients, subsided spontaneously. 2 patients had meningitis. One of the patients where I had used a muzzle, which I had showed the video where we were trying to push the muzzle because the vessel was going through the nerve, had meningitis. I really do not know what was the reason, whether the muzzle itself caused some meningitic reaction. I'm not very sure. 2 patients had pseudomeningocele. But what was surprising is that 6 of our patients had a transient facial nerve palsy, which is a little higher compared to the 2 to 3% which is given in the literature. Luckily for us, all the patients had recovered fully. In the immediate post-operative period, 112 patients had a very good pain relief. 10 had only partial pain relief, and there was absolutely no change of pain in 4 patients. And out of these 4 patients, because they had severe pain, 2 of the patients were reoperated, out of which 1 had a partial relief and other did not have any change of pain and is still suffering. Recurrence of pain after a pain-free interval was seen in 2 patients. So thank you very much. Thank you, the organizers, for giving me this opportunity. And if there are any questions, I am ready to take up any questions.
Sir, there are no questions, sir. Thank you very much, Sir Murthy.